The three themes that stand out in your body of work appear to be the early modern history of trade and economy in Iran, Iran's bilateral relations with the outside world and their impact, and material culture. Can you identify connections among these themes? How significant are they in the broader historical context, and how frequently have they been overlooked by historians?
Well, I can give you a precise answer to these questions. My interest in the silk trade and in commodities and trade in general and commerce was really sparked when I did a PhD at UCLA in the United States, where I ended up working with Nikki Keddie, who was my advisor, whom I had originally approached because I wanted to do something about the constitutional revolution. And she was a specialist on that. And she basically talked me out of that by saying that there's already work being done about it. There are a couple of books coming out. If you really want to enter some virgin territory, so to speak, I would recommend you being Dutch, that you get into the Safavid period, because very little has been done about it. And you can make use of your Dutch knowledge by getting into Dutch in East India Company archives in Holland. And I followed her advice without, again, really knowing what I was getting into, because I knew little about the Safavids. Actually, very little had been published anyway at this point, other than Roger Savory's book about the Safavids, 1980, I think it had come out. So, but I followed her advice, and I ended up getting a grant and a scholarship to go to Europe to do research in Rome and in Paris and London and The Hague. So I spent 6 months in The Hague working in the Dutch National Archives. And what I pulled out of it was an enormous amount of, enormously large body of work about the silk. And so I ended up writing this book about the silk trade coming out of Iran, which automatically then also got me into relations between Iran and the outside world, because half the book is about the negotiations between the Iranian authorities, the Shah and his court, on the one hand, and the agents of the Dutch East India Company on the other hand. So it became a cultural book as much as a book about commodities. Now, my other aspect, my other main focus, which came a bit later, meaning material culture. Of course, silk was already material culture, but specifically the history of commodities, and more so consumables, drugs and stimulants, really came about, again, through Nikki Keddie, interestingly, because she had been invited to a conference in London, organized by the much lamented Roy Porter, very famous historian, a one-day conference at the Wellcome Institute, where he was the director, on opium. And so I was her research assistant, and she asked me to write a preliminary paper, because she said, well, I don't know all that much about opium, certainly not about opium in the Middle East, so why don't you go explore it a little bit? So I did, went to the library, wrote a paper, 25-page paper. She liked it very much, and she said, well, I'm not sure if I can add to this. I think you should go to London, which is really remarkable, because most professors would have said, thank you very much. And then the research assistant appears in a footnote 5 years later, thanks very much for your work, right? So she sent me to London for this one-day conference. So I went, gave a paper, out of it came an article, and out of it came an interest which had also already been reinforced. Again, I'm going back to my time in Iran now. When I was a student there, I smoked opium in the forests of Gilan, near Siarkal, with friends in a very traditional setting, and thought it was absolutely fascinating, because opium has this sort of romance to it, and its time sort of slows down, and then it becomes liquid and so forth, and you do get into sort of a trance, dreamlike and so forth. But it's also very sociable, but it's also very addictive, so you have to be careful with it. So I didn't pursue that too much, but it did again add to my interest and fascination with this particular drug, and so the two combined made me continue working on it after this article, and out of it eventually came what I call my drugs book, meaning The Pursuit of Pleasure. So those are the two main focal points of my research, and both go back to a very specific set of experiences.